we'll find someone else in here. Put all the.
No time for that. This book is gonna go to press next week.
Oh.
So, no luck.
You can tell when they come, people come through the door like this.
That was still there.
One of the things that I was thinking about, Lance, was if you look at Mendocino, the old pictures of Mendocino and Mendocino when you were a kid and when I came here, it was a much funkier community. It didn't have a lot of polished, expensive stuff that were being sold to people from somewhere else.
Well, loggers don't necessarily go for the most shishi line of things. They like boots and pans that last a while. They want their washboard to be a good washboard. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a mill town, so of course it had a different vibe than it does now.
And the signs had to represent what was being sold inside.
Right, a lot of the older signs maybe gave a lot more information to the person as opposed to a feeling. You know, a lot of the signs I see now, the people are trying to like emote, shall we say, through their signs. Whereas signs, just these type, would tell you some brand names, it would tell you who they had, you know, Winchester ammunition, stuff like that, you know, Nicholson files. They'd give you a bunch of information, kind of like the yellow pages of today.
Remember the big hanging boot at Macala's?
Always a boot,
You know,
for the cobbler.
Yeah, the icon signs were very common. And the big hanging pocket watch at Dostal's.
Exactly, Dostal's had a great sign, Macala's boot. So what was the sign though that kind of put you over the top when you came here, that you moved? There's always that job that you kind of know you're gonna make it. What was it? The first, you know, the biggie.
Well, the first one that comes to mind when you say that was my shop when I first came was in the harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my visions of being able to blend industry and art as two compatible communities. Mm-hmm. And invited several other artists to set up studios in the harbor. And Floyd Winters came and Michael Logan and a few others, and it was working for a while. But I was lettering a lot of boats. Mm-hmm. Where I had in Southern California, and I really wanted to get back into that here. And I remember walking down A-Dock, and I was going down there to letter a boat for one of the Highliners on A-Dock. And another one of the guys looked at him and said, "What are you going to do next year?" Which meant, you know, hey, when this hippie's gone and out of business, you're going to have something on your boat that nobody's going to be able to reproduce. And that was the one that first kicked me over the edge of being accepted in that community.
Which boat was it?
Billy Hass's boat, the Davy Boy.
Uh-huh. Double ender?
No.
No, it's a square stern boat, yeah. Had it been built in Noyo, or had it come from somewhere else? Or did you not get the history of the boat, or just paint me a name on this boat?
I don't remember where Davy Boy was built.
But you've done a lot of boats since then.
Hundreds. Lots and lots of boats.
And have you painted any in the boat barn while they're still on the ways?
Oh, sure.
Right, so a couple of them. Just give us a couple of those boats.
Oh,
Tarantino, did you do the Tarantino?
The Junior.
Yeah, Tarantino Jr.
There, as far as on the ways, yeah, there are lots of boats on the ways, but the ones that always come to mind are the big steel boats that Chris Van Peer builds up on Highway 20, and when he used to build them on on Benson Lane, and back before that, when he was off in the prairie behind Benson Lane.
Exactly.
And when I'd show up to letter the boat was always the day that the house movers would show up to start jacking it up. And so I was always working on a moving target with those. And
Excuse me, what year did you come here, when you started your little business?
that was 77.
Okay.
Rick, can you go back a little further and tell where you got started and how long it was before you actually came here, you were actually working in the trade?
Yeah, I was fishing with a guy in Half Moon Bay who bought a ranch in Philo, and we moved up and were fishing the North Coast and fishing off Usaw and Wolf Creek, and that's when I first discovered Mendocino.
What year is that?
67. And then we moved to Southern California to help a friend for a couple months in 1970. And it took until the beginning of 77 for us to escape. And while I was down in Southern California, I spent the 7 years working in a sign shop down there, and several shops, and went through an apprenticeship program, and got a lot of different background with a lot of different people, and worked in the movie studios, and had people taking interest in me and teaching me a lot of different aspects of gold leaf work and carving, and the information wasn't given out very freely then either. It was one of those things that you could ask questions and not get any answers until they felt that you were worthy of hearing the answer. So I came up through those ranks. I worked with guys that talked about when they were apprentices, their job was taking the horses to the livery while the wagon was lettered. For real, I mean, and they had the old press pots of pigment where they'd squeeze out the pigment out of these soldered cans and mix them with the oil and varnish to make their own paints. So I came up through those ranks.
Are the paints different now?
The paints got real nice for a lot of years. And what we have now gets almost impossible to work with. They don't flow like they did, they don't hold up like they did.
And they don't pollute like they did?
That's true.
So was that the change that occurred, or was it just a dumbing down of the industry's supply source?
It's a combination of both, Paul. There's a meeting California's EPA standards. California was the leader in the nation at trying to come up with non-polluting paints, trying to get rid of a lot of the toxicity, and people from all over the country were joking about California, and a lot of California guys were going out of state to buy their paints to try and get something that worked. And now they're getting pretty much everywhere that it's the same paint that doesn't work equally well for everyone.
Well, it leveled the playing field.
But at the same time, one moment, Liz, at the same time, something that's changed is how computers have become part of life, and how 30 years ago, I never had anybody coming around saying, I want to a sign done in, let me see your fonts. You know, that wasn't what was happening. It was, you know, here, I need a sign, and I'd pick up a brush and I'd letter it, or I'd draw something, and every sign that felt legitimate always started with a pen drawing on a paper napkin and had to have a coffee spill on it or it wasn't real. And nowadays, people come around and you know, everything is fonts and designed with a computer and looks really stiff. And computer stuff just really lacks character. And it's turned to where a whole lot of the industry is computer generated stuff. And vinyl letters that are cut out with a plotter and stuff that's digitally printed. And so the bulk of where the industry is investing their money is into the computer stuff. So they're not putting the money into developing the paints anymore, because that's an outdated mode, which makes it hard for us to get, you know. So I go to garage sales and look on these shelves for the old paints that might still work.
Are you talking oil-based or acrylic?
Oil.
What's the one, oil?
When you talk about it polluting, is that when it is a sign and the rain is hitting it? Or are you talking about discarding the can? Or?
Well, it's mostly what happens when the sign's life is expired. You know, how do you dispose of it? You know, that's one element of it. I mean, it all started with some kid in New York that was starving, eating peeling paint off a windowsill or something, and getting lead poisoning, and somehow that became the norm expected for the industry.
Well, the number one pollutant with painting with solvent-based paints, though, is the cleanup that's involved in the thinning. Because washing brushes, it's one thing if a professional is recycling his fluids all the time. I mean, a professional doesn't pour out his turpentine or his paint thinner. He settles it, he draws it off, he throws away the leaves. Average home painter, they use a gallon of turpentine or a gallon of paint thinner for every can of paint they're using, because they wash their brushes, they wash their hands, they throw the rags down, and they dump the dirty solvent over on the berry briars along the fence. And that's how you end up with gallons of runoff of these, you know, pollutants. But aside from the environmental thing, I'd just like to go back to the science, you know. And so you got set up doing these boats, which kind of made it for you. In other words, you could start to see steady work along the line, because there were other sign companies. I know Sankey Sign was in town and stuff, and they were kind of had a lock on the business for years. I mean, every sign had Sankey on the side of it.
When I came here, the prime sign writers were Ken Brandon, who set up at the Casper compound, and Bruce Sloan had his shop in town.
Right over here.
And David Alba had a shop up next to Brown's Market.
Right.
And
David Alba did our very first sign.
For what?
For Rain Song. He did he was an eclectic sign painter. You know, but all of our sign painters are eclectic. So, I mean, I wasn't talking about Rick. I was talking about all the sign painters but Rick. But anyway, a couple of the things though is that I thought, I bet that you've done a sign, or at least one in your career, that never saw the light of day or was hung on the building, or maybe it was, but the business never went on. Have you painted signs for businesses that never were a business?
not many. I can think of a few that never got picked up where people went out of business before
Before they got their
before
sign.
they got started, and they always paid for it first.
Right, well, the signs are important, I mean,
The ones that come to mind when you ask that question would be fictitious businesses for movies.
well, of course,
Yeah.
that was the next thing, is that I actually have one of your signs, and I was gonna bring it today, but I knew that you would have some of them, that you painted for all of the Murder, She Wrote and different movies in town and stuff, and the one that I have hung on my store, and it covered up our name, and it says, "Sack Shoes for the entire family." So that's how you're actually a celebrity in television, is the Sachs family is known throughout the TV world.
I worked on the Murder, She Wrote sets for 6.5 years, so anything that ever said Cabot Cove was my work. And I had an arrangement with the art director where my name was never on the credits, but every show, every episode, they all involved needing to cover up all of the real signs in the community with something else, and most often they had something to do with the script. But there was always some sign that wasn't part of the script. And my deal with the art director was that I could find one sign every episode to put my name on. And so it was kind of a game going with my dad on the East Coast, who really liked that show. And he'd watch it every week to look to see where the family name is.
Where's Waldo? Where's Rick Sachs on this episode of Murder, She Wrote?
Yeah, so there were Saks shoes. We owned the bank at one for a while.
I thought he's stepping up now, he went from the kids' store to the bank.
Rick, can you think of the most subtle or obscure implementation of that principle? I'm just curious.
I'm not understanding your question.
For the TV show, what was the most obscure or subtle, if you're trying to trick your dad one week, where would you go?
Oh, it was when we turned the Mendocino Hotel into the Bank of Mendocino. And next to the doorway, there are the little frame boxes where they put the menus. And it was putting a little sign in that menu board that talked about, "This bank has been owned and operated by the Sachs family." That might have been the most obscure. Oh, can I tell another movie story?
Absolutely, that's what you're here for.
There was a time when I think it was Boise Cascade had plans for putting condos out over the headlands. And there was a whole lot of commotion about that, and the community rallied together and opposed it and got the headlands brought into the state park system. Well, here it is some years later, one of the movie companies that came to town, they looked down here on the headlands, and there was this parking area that people like to go to that had these deep ruts. And for half of the year, it was so muddy you couldn't get in there. But they noticed people really liked the area. And they went to state parks and cut a deal where they said, if we can use that as a movie set, what we'd like to do is dig out the mud and put a zillion loads of rock in there and turn that into a parking area that your community could use year-round. We'll make that kind of investment in it in exchange for getting to use it for a week. And so that they got a green light on that. So when they're setting up their movie set, they had one of these companies that has the rental chain link fences sections, and they fenced off that area. And then they brought in a Caterpillar tractor and
grader, perhaps.
They had a grader, they had a trailer that was the construction site trailer. They had a backhoe and a couple of dump trucks. And I went and I lettered the name of this construction company on all of their equipment and on the trailer. Meanwhile, they had me build an 8-by-8-foot sign that said, "Coming soon on this location," and it had a painting of an architectural illustration of a high-rise building. And then it had the name of the, the contractor and the architect and all that stuff. So the sign went up. Within hours, there are people outside the fence protesting this horrendous deed that was about to happen when they thought that they got the land protected from the developers.
What year was that?
I don't remember, Ben. It would have been in the late 70s.
Yeah, I thought earlier.
And but then I remember that the art director or one of the assistant directors went outside the chain link fence and he had a clipboard and he started calling everybody over and said, "Hey, can I get you guys to all come back here and do this tomorrow? And I'll pay you $50 a piece." And this $50 was a lot of money then, and everybody was out of work, and it was winter time, and people came back, and they come back the next day, and he said, "Okay, just go give that lady your name and social security number, and then go over there to the wardrobe trailer, and they'll give you the right shirt to wear, and they'll fit you with the right protest sign," because they had me making protest signs on them. And so here are all these people walking around back and forth getting filmed with their protest signs. And there was this, what I was thinking about was the confused look on a lot of their faces because they didn't know what side they were on.
Rick, did you ever do a real protest sign?
Yes.
You want to tell us about it?
A real protest sign?
Yeah, one that actually people were going to protest because they knew what they were protesting.
Yeah, I can tell you about one of those. I can tell you about one that might be coming around again. And
Which side is it on?
what, I remember doing a banner that had to wrap around Eagles Hall that was protesting offshore oil development. And I remember how it was the very beginning of vinyl banners when they were first coming out, and how I lettered that banner, and my shop was 22 feet long, and I had this banner that was about 80 feet long, and I had to reel it and roll it up on each end and do it in little sections and try and get it to dry, and it was raining out and it wouldn't dry. And I remember the sun came out and I tied ropes to the grommets in the corner and put pipes on the end of them, threw them over the next door neighbor's Quonset hut, pull the banner over and drape it over the buildings and get it out there in the sun to get it to dry. And finally I dusted it with talcum powder so that I could roll it up and get it up to the hearings. And the sign always looked like it was flocked. So some of what I keep thinking about is how a sign has to reflect the merchandise inside. Whatever's being sold, whatever the service, it has to reflect the character and the quality of that. And what happens when, instead of selling boots to the loggers, Mendocino changes to where people are selling antique jewelry or cut glassware, or things that wouldn't have been sold in the old logging camp days that don't really fit that old lifestyle, but they're who Mendocino has turned into. And to try and figure out how to do a sign that reflects the merchandise, but still fits the architecture on the exterior without changing the character of the town.
Well, you have a real conundrum in Mendocino because there are certain rules and stuff to keep Mendocino. We want to keep the character of Mendocino like Mendocino. I mean, we all love Mendocino. Obviously, for somebody like Alvin, though, or myself even.
Blame me.
I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, you know, you can dig back and think about what it was like. You know, is the character of the town has changed tremendously by the people who populated it.
Well, Mendocino used to be a town, now it's a tourist thing. I won't go any further than that.
Well, right,
It's no longer a town.
The character has changed, but the parameters within which you are working within for Mendocino is actually, has been kind of set for you by the time frame that it was put in place. In other words, the people who decided when they would freeze Mendocino so that it's the way that it is, so that it is preserved at that point, kind of locks you in a little bit. You and I have often talked about how what really used to drive the sign business was the marketplace. There was a sign painter, he had a shop. Alvin got a sign for his shop. It was a nice sign, he had you do some gold leaf. His competition goes, Alvin's sign looks a lot better than my sign. I'm gonna go get a new sign, and not only am I putting gold leaf on it, I'm gonna have him carve some filigree along the top. And that's what drove the sign business. And so now what drives the sign business is, how big can my sign be? And what am I allowed to put on it? You know, what fits within the character of the town? So that's definitely made it a lot more difficult for you to express certain ideas and characteristics in signs. I'm sure we've talked about it.
When I came here, I remember Mendoza's in the parking lot on the north end. There was a big metal ice machine out in the parking lot with big letters on it that said ice. On the south wall, there were big letters there that were advertising bait and tackle or something like that. The town was filled, you know, your shoe store was Buckaloo Realty.
Let's be careful, we're being recorded here.
And there were, you know, everywhere around there were signs that would not be permitted today by the current review board and their guidelines. And what's happened is the guidelines have kind of been reduced down to nothing can be over 6 square feet, and everything has to be made out of wood.
Right.
And that isn't how it was when we came here, and what the time that the review board was trying to freeze things into, it isn't anymore, and that standard isn't happening anymore. And consequently, everything starts kind of looking the same.
Well, it has to when you work within a size. I mean, when you have maximum sizes and things like that, everybody is going to go for the maximum size, and so that means that all of the signs will be uniform because everybody's going to get it. But even working within the parameters, I mean, the historical review board has done a wonderful job of keeping the character of Mendocino. You know, it's a beautiful, beautiful town, and none of us wants to see that. I laugh because, of course, my grandmother and her family, I had my Aunt Mary here, Dee remembers when she was here to give her talk. They lived in the greenhouse over here. And my grandmother was totally perplexed why every room had a door in it. And she mentioned it to the neighbor, I've never lived in a house that had so many doors. And she goes, well, yeah, it's the bordello. So my grandmother moved out the next day. You know, so there we have it. I don't think that we can put a bordello across from corners of the mouth. But you do a wonderful job working within these parameters. You build a lot of beautiful signs in Mendocino and help keep the characters so nice. And you have a little freer hand in Fort Bragg. And the boats give you, you know, obviously you get to do a lot with boats and character signs. And do you do private? I mean, people must have things done for their homes and for their residences and for their entrances and things like
Do a
that.
lot of home signs and carved signs for vacation rentals. What?
Pelican Rest.
Yeah, that kind of
Yes,
stuff.
definitely.
One of the things that just came to mind, back to your last comment, was when we were working with the Main Street program and the state architect's office was coming around from there, we got to work a lot with the historic people from the state architect's office. And I remember doing overlay drawings of every building around the downtown Fort Bragg area and having the architect showing, you know, this is the natural sign band on this building, and coming up with 2 or 3 different possibilities for every building. And every building, when you look at it, it called out for a very different, the signs were unique, the needs were unique for that building. And I look at Mendocino that way. You know, there's so much of Mendocino that has businesses in what were designed as homes, which changes that whole situation. But there are a lot of commercial buildings, and a lot of them have needs that are much different than a 6 square foot sign. Some of the buildings are set back off the road more and need bigger signs. Some of them are huge blank walls, and if you stuck a 6 square foot sign on that wall, it'd look really silly.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, we've gone over it many times, you know, it's like Mendocino used to be a town full of livery stables, shops, residences, saloons, plenty of them. You know, lots of water towers and stuff like that. Characters and times, you know, change. I'm in your camp, you know I am. I look at a lot of buildings and I say, I'd put a 12-foot sign on that building. Not because I necessarily, because I think the building would look good with it. You know, I think that it would add character. I'm with you. I mean, I believe that signs tastefully done and well executed absolutely add to the character of a building. And which one of us would want to go up and not see letters on the front of, which is now Harvest? Of course, I call it Harbosis because it's always Mendoza's to me. But I want to see the sign up there. I want to see since 1909. It makes me feel good. I love seeing Oddfellows Hall, or, you know, whatever it is on the side of the building. What if we went in now and we took the statue off the top of the Masonic Hall? I mean, there'd be a hue and cry around here, but if I said, well, hey, it exceeded the height limit, you know, nobody would be happy about that. But there's another aspect. I bet that you've actually, something else I wanted to ask you was, you must have lettered some logging trucks.
Lots and lots of logging trucks.
Right. There used to be a massive fleet of logging trucks, and jippos, as we called them, people, independent owners of logging trucks. So that was probably a pretty good little thing when, you know, I mean, you've probably done some really beautiful trucks.
I was looking through some of my photographs before coming down here, and as I'm going through, I was seeing logging trucks where I've had that same truck that I probably lettered 4 different times for different people.
Right. Passed in. Yeah.
You know, that it just keeps getting passed on.
Kind of like a really good horse. They're a lot more expensive than they look.
You know, one of the, I was looking at you know the one that Duncan Rasmussen drives, the
Sure.
self-loader?
Yeah, no,
You
that
know-
was Iverson's at one time, I think,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah, it was
And
Ronnie
Harry
Iverson.
Babcock's,
And Babcock had it, so.
and Morris, Mike Morris,
Right.
you know, and it,
You love it every time they sell it, you gotta put a new name on the side. But have you done I mean, some guys really want the bells and whistles, they want gold leaf, they want the whole works, right?
yeah, I put spun gold leaf on a truck one time for Bud Turney and won a national award.
There you go. And you'd have to say, dealing with
The fire trucks.
yeah, well, yeah, all of these trucks, I mean, once you letter up a truck, you know, the competition between Jerry Philbrick and Bobby Beacon was legend. And they chromed and painted the heck out of their logging trucks for quite a while, so I don't know if you got in on any of that, but that was a good business for a while.
Yep.
But loggers are great people to work with, they all have a story, they have something that they, you know, it's like you have met, you know, basically the fabric and the foundation of this area, and you've met a lot of characters, I'm sure.
First thing I did when I came to Mendocino County, first job was a logging truck, a fleet of logging trucks for Apollo Logging over in Philo, in
Mhm.
Boonville.
Right. And that's rough logging territory there at Boonville. That's the Annapolis region and everything. There are real loggers down
Yeah.
there. So yeah, that's really great. Equipment, cats, things like that.
That,
Did you work for AJ Gray ever? Did you do anything for him?
yeah, used to letter a lot of AJ's equipment. And I think my favorite out there though wasn't a sign for AJ, it was a sign on AJ's property. There was a historic character that was known as John the Track Walker. And track walker, you ever see the cart that goes on the railroad track that has a handle on it? Pump it up and down and it turns the wheels, and that's how John used to get around, is on his track walker. And he had this little cabin out at AJ Gray's. And I got to make a sign for that cabin long after John was dead, but there was one of those old track walkers behind the roundhouse, and the handle was broken off it. And I asked Dick Rexroad, can you stand on that for a minute? Let me take your picture. And here, hold this handle in place, lean against it like it's still there. And I took a picture of that and used that for a model and carved a sign to go out on John the Track Walker's cabin at AJ Gray's ranch.
That's the one in 10 Mile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great place, beautiful place.
So, how do you feel about, get back to the idea that your signs are circumscribed by some committee that made some decisions 30 years ago about what is historical relative to signs, or what they were trying to preserve. Here we are 30 odd years later, and they probably did not consult with a panel of sign makers to talk about how you create the look of history. What would be your recommendations or thoughts about signs in Mendocino going forward?
Well,
If that isn't putting you too much on the spot.
it isn't. You know, one of the things
Sorry.
that we have on the review board right now is an architect. We also have somebody who is a history buff that works here at the Kelly House. And I think that's an incredible resource that I've been looking for on the review board forever. Because they're people that are able to feel the heartbeat and pulse of the community, to be able to make changes, that can look and see that, you know, we don't have to accept the standards that were designed by somebody else long ago that didn't understand this stuff. I remember a day, Paul, when Don Hahn was the chair of the board and asked me to come by his office to talk about some signs. And when I walked through the office, down to his private office, it meant going through this hall. And there was one of those long panoramic photos on his wall. And I looked at that photograph and I saw that on the other side of the street here, there was a row of houses, and behind that another row of houses, and then another street and more houses and train tracks, and that whole Headlands was developed. And I looked at all the signs in the photographs and stuff, and I was confused. How do you nail down a timeline to say this is where we want to stop development? To say, to say this is the time in history where we want to freeze. And I think what was explained to me was that the time chosen was when the review board was founded, which was, what, 74?
3.
73? So,
I want to steer away from that. It's political. It really is. It's too political, because the thing is that Mendocino, frankly, lost their way when they didn't develop a plan early on to look at what Mendocino was and where they wanted it to go. I'm born and raised here. I've lived here all my life. I honestly think that Mendocino should have been redeveloped into the thriving city that it was at one time, with the number of residences and businesses that existed at one time. It was easy to do. We could have went back and mapped the whole city. Livery stables, they could have been gas stations, we could have transposed each business into another business and everything like that. That's not how the model went. It was stopped. We decided to freeze it in a certain area and stick with that. When a consensus comes that maybe the idea is to build a model and take Mendocino, let Mendocino grow, but let Mendocino grow in a way that the historical character is continued on, that would be a fantastic thing.
yeah.
I think that we have enough photographic evidence, mapping, and old records that we actually have the blueprints for all of the residences and everything that people want to build. I think that we have the plans and the blueprints for all the water towers that should be put up to stop, to solve the water problem. Every single piece of property here should now have a water tower on it with a tank. It should be a requirement. You want to build something, you have to put up a tower and a tank. Sure, why not? Fights fire, everybody has water, it's all gravity feed. So all, that's in a real world. But the thing is that I really, I love your signs. You and I have a long history. We've gone back a long ways. We made signs together. I don't want to, delve into everything that we did with signs. But the trucks, you did the fire trucks and dealt with the firemen in Fort Bragg. Have you done more than Fort Bragg's fire department? Westport?
Fort Bragg, Mendocino, Albion, Elk.
I said, wow.
Rick, just, well, I'm sure through all your tenure of sign making and from the time you were apprenticing on, can you remember what was maybe perhaps one of your favorites or most memorable signs? Not necessarily that you've done, but one that you've seen and could tell us about? It must be one that you thought was super creative and simple or something. Didn't mean to scare you.
No, that's, I don't have a quick answer for that
Yeah.
one, Paul.
I'm sure you've seen millions of them.
I know there are times when I see signs that a lot of my favorites would be something that just has a beautifully executed layout, good lettering, done by somebody with a brush that didn't make patterns and it just flowed out real quick and easy and had that kind of, you know, those kind of signs look like music to me. And I love them. You know, then there are the signs that are where there's more craft added into the sign, where I get to see some nice woodworking and some good carving done on it and some wood turning on it. And I've always liked those kind of signs too. And I think my favorite sign is usually the one that I'm working on at the moment.
When did you start getting into doing the carving? All along? That seems to be a lot of what you're doing nowadays.
At summer camp when you were.
Oh.
Well, yeah, as a little kid, but carved signs, 1970.
Are there more now? It just seems like I'm seeing more of them.
I don't know, I've been doing them forever, it seems.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that brings up another thing that we're gonna broach here. We just had one of your signs in town go missing, and then it came back. So, is that the only sign that's ever gone missing and been returned?
probably.
Probably. If people don't know what we're talking about, it's the Mendo Burger sign. And it's an outrageous sign. It looks like a large carved cheeseburger. And the owners were so ecstatic to get it and have it put up, and then it went missing. And so the great mystery of the carved burger existed for a while, and I actually don't know exactly how it got back to where it is, and maybe you could tell us.
Well, tell them too how, when you install it, the links that you go to see to it that it won't be going missing.
But when we first started talking, we were talking about icon signs and the historic aspect of icon signs. And somehow that got to, okay, well, what about a carved cheeseburger? And Jeff pulled a cheeseburger off the grill and put it on the table, and I said, great, and took a photograph of it. And then got this chunk of sinker wood. It was beautiful old growth redwood, and carved that burger in it. And then when it came time to install it, and there were brackets. I anticipated somebody might try and jack this sign, and I'm gonna put bolts that are different size heads on it so that somebody wouldn't be able to just go up there with one wrench. And I put some big honking screws in the back of it, and some of them had Phillips heads and some had square drives. And I put that together in a way where I thought it was gonna be vandal proof. And here it was, there's this 4x4 beam coming off of the building to a post, and it looked like somebody drove a truck probably up onto the sidewalk, to get up that kind of height, and then took a chainsaw to this beam in the middle of the night, and somehow didn't wake anybody up in downtown Mendo. And so the sign was gone.
And that was the night when senior pranks happened.
Yes.
The night the night before graduation, when senior pranks take place. I don't know that that's what it was, but that's when it happened.
It might be a coincidence.
So we
We wouldn't do that.
cut out a sheet of plywood to make another sign that was just like that, only flat painted. And they put that up for a while. And then one of the sheriff's deputies got a call that the sign was found. and they found it down in the bushes behind the comm school.
Oh, my God.
And it was broken and needed to be glued back together and repaired and repainted, but it's back up.
How long was it missing for?
A couple months.
When did this happen?
A year, we just had, last year's graduation would have been the 1 year mark from when it was gone, so.
Rick, that was the big, focus on that sign, was that it got ripped off and it was lost, right? And how heartbreaking it was for the owners. And because I own a place right next door, I know how they felt. On the other hand, there was another controversy relative to that sign while it was up and before it was taken, which was about the historical nature of signs in this town, and did that sign, even though it was smaller than the 6 square feet or the 9 square feet or whatever, was that sign historically compatible with what we're trying to accomplish here, or what the Historical Review Board was trying to accomplish. So people were on both sides. That was a very controversial sign, and the fact that it was, when it was ripped off, the students were not the first people to or the school system was not the first group of people who were thought to have messed around with taking the sign. It was an active, people thought that activists were, people who really didn't like the sign for political reasons had ripped it off. And then that sort of all dissipated. But I just want to bring that up to give some more accuracy.
Yeah, I know that was a part of it. I also know that I assumed that that sign would be hanging in somebody's dorm room in some other part of the country.
Its uniqueness makes it desirable. The Eagles had the eagle for 35 years in the basement of Eagles Hall. When, the eagle I'm talking.
Yeah.
When Melvin and I painted the Eagles Hall so many years ago, they said, boy, if we could only get the eagle up, we'd love that. And you know me, I said, where is it? And I went down to the basement and I got it and I brought it up there. And 3 hours later, it was over the door of Eagles Hall. And it looked incredible. When the porch light was on and you went by Eagles Hall, that eagle was there with its arms spread. I mean, it was incredible looking. Those people were so stoked. The Eagles were all excited about that whole thing. It was stolen within weeks. Somebody drove a truck up, they tied a rope around it. Same thing, I had it hooked in with a giant timber into the side of the building. I notched into the building. They yarded it off and took it. 2 years later, it came back. So, I said, the sign's coming back. When it went, I said, it's gonna come back like the eagle did. I didn't know it was gonna come back so quick, but it finally did come back. But I laughed about it. When you have something that's unique and you stick it out there for everybody, here it is. Most of us would go by it, appreciate it as either a controversial piece of art or a beautiful piece of art, however we view it. But we wouldn't think of hurting it or damaging it or taking it, but somebody goes, I gotta have that. Gotta have that 4-foot cheeseburger. We're lucky to get it back. I like it.
Have other signs been stolen of yours?
Not that I can think of, there probably have been some, but I can't nail it right now. That was the one that was the big controversy. There was.
We did hear that same night there was an attempt on the Moody's sign. That the hardware was messed with.
Have you had to fix repetitive vandalization of any particular sign? The sign that somebody didn't like that you went back and had to repair more than once? Somebody painted it over, damaged it?
No, but I just thought about a repair I did on a sign that was, my favorite sign that since I've been on the coast. Walking we used to drive up Little Lake Road, up past the gravel pit, and there was a place where you can park, and there's a trail that we used to walk out to Observation Point.
Mhm.
And you would go out that trail, and it went out to this point where you had an ocean view, and it was really a nice little place, and there was a bench there and a wild rose growing there. But just before you got there was a trail that went across there that went down to the woodlands, and it was the Manly Gulch Trail. And I remember there was a post in the ground that would have, and a sign on that post that said Manly Gulch Trail with an arrow, and it was so beautifully carved into a slab of wood that had most likely been made on the spot. The back of the sign was still the natural round shape of the board of the tree, and the post had been carved out to match the sign. And I found it laying on the ground and went out there with a brace and bit and a 1-inch bit and some dowel, and put it in place and re-drilled it at angles and doweled it back in, because originally those weren't put up with any hardware.
No.
They were made on the spot, and I remember repairing that sign and wish it was still there.
And it was made by,
It would have been an old CCC sign.
Yeah. Have you ever repainted any Burma shave signs?
No.
Because as I was driving over here, I thought about when I was a kid, I used to go up the Branscombe logging road. You'd go up 10 Mile River, and then you take the North Fork, and then you go up the hill to Branscombe. Now that's where they used to bring the off-highway trucks that cross from Usal, come down that road. It's called the Burma Road. And it was steep and it was twisty. And so guys used to steal Burma shave signs around the country. They go on a vacation, hop out of the car, stop it, jump out, grab a Burma shave sign. And so that's something that I really remember as a kid, my memory of driving up the road. So I was curious I knew what the Burma Road was, a whole hellish wartime ordeal for many prisoners. I had a slogan, and I just thought about how here it was a company that their policy for advertising across the country was to get local sign makers to make Burma shave signs and go nail them up on people's fence posts. You put a sign on every post, and as you're driving by, you get one of those little ditties. Car was whizzing full with his, and Burma shave. And must have been pretty cool. I just didn't know if you'd resurrected
No, I
any
never
from
did
them.
any Burma shave.
I think I might be coming in and having myself a set of Burma shaves. I'll put them on my road going up to my property, and as I go by, I'll be able to think about you every time.
then you can get out and steal one.
No, I would steal one and bring it home and put it in my house. And right there at the end, you get the end of the little ditty, and there's no sign that says Burma shave. At least you could be decent and take the first sign of the thing, because it said Burma shave. Burma shave. It was a pretty cool thing, but sign painters, there was a lot of different work for them back then. Painting billboards. There was a time when billboards were painted and not rolled out.
Did a lot of them.
What are these wonderful signs, please?
Well, the Hamilton Brown Shoe Company,
Maybe the chairs could have moved on, yes, thanks.
my research shows that was a company that was it was the premier shoe manufacturer in the United States from 1888 to up into the 1930s. This sign was underneath Mendoza's.
Lift it up for a second so she can see where it says Mendoza's on it. So she can get the whole effect of it.
Did you, work on this sign, or are you saying this was an older sign? that
No,
was
this
there
is an
already?
old sign,
Oh, okay.
and I was asked to do a restoration on it, and I think that it probably has a lot more value in its current state than if I do anything to it, so I don't want to.
Good idea.
When you restore, if you were to restore that, would you just completely use it and cover everything exactly as it is, or would you create a new sign?
If I was asked to do a restoration on that, I'd make a new one that looked just like it, and not destroy this one.
But would it wouldn't be okay because it's more than 6 square feet?
Yeah, couldn't put it up.
It's a nice sign.
When I came to Mendocino, Bruce Sloan had his sign shop over on Little Lake Road, and this was the sign on his garage for his sign shop.
All right, wasn't this right above the pool table?
Wonder
Yes.
who has that phone number now.
Yeah.
Did you paint your signs alone, or do you have many people helping you, or?
It's my wife and I, and we usually have one shop helper, and sometimes two.
This, you should point out that this sign pre-existed. You hang it up at your grandfather.
Right.
I think they could hang it, they could get away with it that way if it was
Sure.
Sure, absolutely.
Grandfather did?
Here's a carved sign I did back in probably 1970.
Wow.
My favorite sign was more than 6 square feet.
So which one was it?
It was actually, it was a banner across Albion Street that said, "Impeach Han."
I don't remember that one.
What were you being impeached for?
Well, it was the morning after a meeting, a review board meeting. The two fellows who disagreed with me were the ones who did it, and I'd be honored.
Do you remember what the issue was?
I'm not sure, and I think it had to do with what is preferable, something that's aping everything that exists, rather than anything that's simply in harmony with, compatible with, but not all the same. That might have been it. Another one that I might share with you is a lady who came to a board meeting with a sign for approval. She had been told that, unfortunately, she had made the sign, had it made before she gained its approval. It was a good sign. Actually, she was a clairvoyant. We just couldn't approve it the way it stood, and apologized to her. And she left in a huff. And the chairman was heard to mumble, "I think she would have known that."
There were a couple of situations. I don't know, how much time do we have left?
Well, it's sort of up to you, but if anybody has anything else to ask, just go ahead and do it now, because, you know, this is a conversation with the audience. And it's being videotaped by Channel 3, and after their first presentation, it's available for purchase for any of you that would like to you know, own this, and so, we certainly appreciate the fact that you two have been here talking about signs, and it might be that afterwards, you wanna look at some other pictures, and I think there's some photographs there too that you might find interesting, and also on the back table. So, and then don't forget that we have refreshments afterwards. And when this is ended now, and Bruce Levine has an announcement to make.
We're not through yet.
No, and
Well, I could go on for another hour.
Please do.
Sounds like you had a story to tell just now.
Yeah, you were just,
Yeah.
you were
Go
reminded.
for it, Rick.
Oh, I was thinking about, one of them was, a lady came in and she was opening a store for large women. And she had this drawing that she wanted of a very, very large naked lady in a cartoony drawing where she'd be reclined in the sign with bubbles coming up, and it said "More to Love." And what I had to go through to try and talk her out of that. And I see a photograph of what she finally got after she didn't go for getting talked out of it. She had the sign made, and I think it lasted for a day or two, and then everybody else in the community got it removed by convincing her to do something.
Did you actually make the sign for her?
Yeah,
According to what she wanted?
yeah, and it didn't last. And I was very glad of that.
Can you describe her apology for not following your original advice?
I don't remember it. I remember another thing that comes to mind is, one time Jim Cummings came over and wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to me and said, "Make that sign for me." And I drew a quick sketch of what I understood him to say. And he looked at my sketch and said, "Don't correct my grammar, do it the way I did it." And that was this sign that says, "For sale cheap if Prop 13 don't pass." Another thing that came to mind that was kind of funny was there was a property up on Oak Street that had been in this guy's family for generations, and it was surrounded by residential development, and he wanted to divide the property and was told no. So he looked into what kind of use the property would be approved for, and found that it was approved for agriculture. So he came to me and was talking about what to do, and what we decided on was to put up a sign that said "Future Hog Farm." Accepting future orders now. And that sign went up, and within a couple of days, the property was rezoned. And now there are a half dozen Habitat for Humanity houses on that. And anyway, there are a lot of funny things that happen like that too. There are signs that I find humorous situations and.
Right, and you must get a tremendous amount of satisfaction driving around, looking at the part that you did in a lot of these businesses. I mean, you've painted signs for us that have been up for over 20 years now. You know, I mean, you go by there, you see the sign is there. It's your signs are part of a lot of viable businesses and things. I mean, and you have contact with all of these people. When we see your sign, we know that it's an intimate contact. You have to get in groove with these people and understand what they want. I mean, each job is an individual job. You're like an architect and a craftsman and a counselor. I mean, look at all the knowledge that you bring to your trade that you loan to each one of your customers when they come in to have a sign made. That's the tremendous thing when dealing with you, you know, is you bring this huge school of knowledge about signs, and you've done myriad signs, so you're able to bring that together. I mean, it's always been a pleasure working with you to make a sign. It always feels like we come up with a creation, you know, that's a, you know, we sometimes have to work within parameters, but so that you must have had this great sense of community, of being part of the community.
That's the best part. That's the part that lasts.
Right, and that's it. It takes a village, so to speak.
Well,
It takes a village to make a sign
Exactly right.
some of what, you know, trying to keep things in a perspective is sometimes I have somebody that wants a sign that's gonna make their business happen. And I wanna see that happen also, but it might be that what they're wanting to make their business happen doesn't make the community happen, because it all has to fit together. And so I try and keep that in mind with what I do, that businesses, you know, a business might be there for 10 years and then they're gone. You know, as far as what I'm doing to the architecture, you know, I'm not defacing a historic building. I'm not remodeling the architecture. I'm just putting a sign up, and the sign can come down and you fill in a couple of screw holes and it's back to the way it was later, but was before. But the community, the character of the community, and the visual flow of, you know, the community is, you know, people go from this store to this store to this store, and it all has to flow.
Rick,
Paul?
what do you think the average age of one of your signs is in its original form? And I say that keeping, you know, adding one other piece, which is the rate of businesses that go out of business in this town. So what do you think? I mean, I don't know what the rate is, but it's phenomenally low, you know, high compared to other communities that are not destination communities like this one is. So what do you think the average length of life of a business sign is in this community as opposed to, let's say, Fort Bragg?
The life of the business or the sign?
Well, I would assume that they're related pretty much.
Well, a lot of businesses find success and want to upgrade their sign.
Or move to a new location,
Where,
requiring a new sign.
yeah. The sign I did for Ed O'Brien, I don't think has been repainted or touched at all with any maintenance in 30 years.
Well, that speaks a lot about the sign and.
What sign is it?
Compass Rose.
You use good paint then, right? From back then.
And
That helped.
That was the only.
Right, the sign on the shoe store though is 22 years old. 23, it'll be 23 years this year on the shoe store. We took it down once, right? We repainted it once.
The rain sign.
Okay, so that, you know, is that one, and the other one is,
Older than that.
yeah, the other one's 20, I guess it's 29. 29 years old, but we repainted that one once too.
Yeah.
So, I'd say you can get a good 12, 13 years out of a sign, you know, without repainting it. Ed got 30 out of his.
Still
But
on?
those signs, huh?
Ed's is still going.
Still going.
Ed's still going, I'm saying that thing's got legs. You can't say that he didn't get his money worth. What's that work out to, a half a cent a day?
It's
Boy, oh,
also in
boy.
a place that probably never sees sun.
Yeah, well, right, it doesn't.
No, it's on, yeah.
Doesn't get any sunshine. And of course, that has a big deal. I mean, you put signs in places that you know are going to last a long time, they're protected, they're in a good position, they're not gonna be out, and then you also make a sign that you say, holy moly, you know, south facing sunshine all day long. Winter, the rain is, like say down at Mendocino Mercantile or one of those buildings down there, those signs would take a brutal beating straight off of the ocean, coming in from the south all the time. Southern exposure, sunshine all the time. They take a lot of beating, they have to be sealed up and stuff. So that plays, like if you're gonna make a sign for Main Street, you have to then take that into consideration, I'm sure. When I was a kid, you couldn't see the ocean from Main Street, by the way. From the Mendocino Hotel, there was no view of the bay. From any place on Main Street, there was no view of the bay. That beautiful view shed that we see out there used to be dilapidated buildings and fences.
Many a year they were there.
Fallen down, and it was in
Fallen
19, I
down,
believe
and
that it was, you know, it was like,
Still there.
they dozed them down, I forget what year, when was that?
56.
56 was it, they dozed it?
After I got out of the high school.
They piled the whole thing down there, brought the fuel truck up and dumped diesel all over it and burned it out. Just like the Usal Hotel.
Rick, two-part question. Have you taken photos of all your work?
No,
And have you considered doing a book of your work?
no.
Well, just a thought.
Just a thought, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I just thought. In the Mendocino section of our bookstore.
You wanna work on that with us, Ben?
Sure.
I've had a lot of years where I didn't own a camera. We don't have any pictures of our wedding either.
Well, I'm just talking about your signs. Mendocino. Yeah.
Did you ever change one of the signs you made, like business cards, they didn't have much money, you changed one letter in the name to, you know what I mean?
Like
And
from-
modified
like
any
from
of your
Flores to
signs for the
Doors?
next owner, where they couldn't afford their own sign, or there was a sign existing and they wanted it to change
Sure.
it.
A used sign.
I'm trying to remember who that was for, there was one of
Sharon's by the
the,
sea.
that's the one I was,
I
yes.
don't know, I'm just guessing, you know.
Yeah, that one came up just recently.
Yeah.
That's the only one that I know
What was it originally?
of. Well, it was Sherry's by the Sea, and then it became Sharon's, and now it's what?
Herons.
Aaron's, yeah, just change a letter. I didn't do that, but they asked me about it.
I thought the S fell off it for a while. Or faded off.
Did you ever make any mistakes painting boats? I think of that cartoon of the New Yorker many years ago. A fellow leaning over the back of his boat, painting the name of the boat, My First Boat, upside down.
Lots of them. Yeah, I've had misspellings on about everything I've ever done at some point.
It's not that bad.
No, it's not that bad. I remember a new building that went up in town where it was a big metal building, and I was up there on the scaffolding and up on my stage and lettered letters that were 18 inches tall down the length of this building, and Fort Bragg Marine, and the sun was beating on it, and I got down when I was done and noticed I left a letter out. And the way it was on the wall, it meant take it all off and start again, which was a whole lot of scrubbing with linseed oil.
You could have tried to sell the guy upon it.
Another time,
Too many of them.
it was it was in the early 80s. And we went down to Southern California, and a friend of mine had one of the first computerized sign-assisted devices, and this thing would make patterns for signs. And I had this carved sign that I was doing for a place in town, and they gave me these 3 boards that were custom milled 3x12s, and I called my friend Bill and said, hey, why don't you make up some patterns for me for this? And he did, and I carved the signs and put it up. And one of the boards, after it was all done, somebody came around and said, you know, that's you misspelled Mendocino. And it was
It's easy.
M-E-D, yeah, the N was missing, it said Mendocino.
I wonder how many people would notice.
I've been waiting for somebody to open a doctor's office or a pharmacy that I could sell that to.
Yeah, there you go.
That was my first experience with a computer.
In selecting your wood for carving, do you have to be pretty selective to know that it's gonna not crack and all that?
Do the best I can, Ben.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I look at
Straight
the wood.
grain and all that.
Redwood lasts around here, and it's not the easiest wood to carve.
It isn't. Chips.
No.
Well, what is easy?
Well, basswood or pine or, you know, but a lot of those woods, they just don't hold up around here.
Do you have a picture of the sign, this timber wolf sign that you just put up?
I don't have any pictures with me of that, Sue.
Well, that's an amazing sign, it's absolutely huge. How big is that piece of wood? How long is it?
Well, that 24 feet. There was a
Where is this?
Is it the Fort Bragg?
Timberwolf Stadium in Fort Bragg. Found this beautiful buckskin, this saw log that was like this big around over in Willits. And they milled a beam out of it for us that was 18 inches by 30 inches and 24 feet long.
Wow.
And got to carve that recently.
Check your spelling on that one.
It was funny, I was at Ross's and the guy came in with the template that he had made, you know, he had it on the top of his truck.
Oh, the big kayak paddle.
Looked like the giant kayak paddle on it, and I saw him go by with that, and I said, what is that? He goes, oh, it's a template for the Timberwolf sign.
It was for cutting the slots in the bottom.
Yeah, he built this, you know, I didn't know who he was, he was on a mission.
Virgil.
Yeah, is that Virgil for?
Virgil Nelson.
Oh, that's Sean, that's Sean's dad. Yeah.
Yeah, that
No
was.
wonder I recognized him.
That was a wonderful project.
Rick, we should meet the other half of your business.
Megan, you come up here and tell some funny stories.
No. Hi, everyone.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Megan and everybody here. You know, Joan and I run a company together, and when I step out in front as the public face of our company, I'm always thinking about Joan, and I know that you feel the same way. And our partners are so critical to our businesses, and they don't get enough due, not because the community doesn't want to give them their due, but because oftentimes they're more private people than we may be, or have a different role to play. But I just wanted to say something more than just a clap. I think that it's incredibly important that that for a business when two people do it and they stay together for a long period of time. And it's a whole lot more than just an applause. It's a lifetime achievement award, and I think you all should recognize that in both of you.
Yep.
Bravo.
Thank you, Paul.
There's some photographs back here showing maybe.
I've known Megan a long time, both of them, of course, and Megan is very, very talented, just amazing. Wow.
And she's had just about enough of this. And if any of the rest of you know Megan, she's had just about enough of this.
Well, might be a good time to circulate and drink some coffee and
Yeah,
let you
that's
show
what
your
it's on.
pictures. And,
I also wanted to say that this is the last one of the history talks for this year. So come back in April when we start again.
Bruce, did you have an announcement?
I just wanted to, if there's anyone here who's interested in what's going on at the Art Center, the Board of Directors meeting, which was on October 21st, is on Mendocino Coast TV, and you can either watch it live or you can download it. So if you care about the Art Center, take a look at it. That's all. Thank you.
Well, this has been fun, thank you very much.
Signs at the top, I keep it right now.
One of the people who was on that survey.
You can tell when they come, people come through the door like this.
Young people who I stood in the early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and they went right for the real estate. I know how she feels about it. Something with someone
Survey the historic buildings.
The sign up. And there was a guy on each end of it, standing on that little parapet. There was another guy, there were a couple of guys on the roof, one of them leaning over with a level and another
The
one.
movie company guys.
And another one with a screw gun. And Pete Samish, the art director, he's standing there with me across the street at the Shell gas station. And he's looking through the camera, ready to take a picture of his guys putting up this sign. And all of a sudden, right behind them, up on the wall, is the siren.
Oh, yeah.
And the siren goes off, and the garage door goes, and he pushed the button, and there were two of his guys that were levitating.
Whoa.
I mean, it was, they got so scared when that siren went off, they just kind of lifted up, and he got it on this photograph.
Oh, God.
Doing a sign toss.
I'd love to see that. That's